Getting started on Facebook here. We'll be going live in just a second. Doing well, Peter. How are you? All right. Looks like we are live on Facebook. Welcome, everybody. We're going to have fun tonight. We're going to have some story time. We're going to go through some different scenarios. I got some cool little pictures drawn on the whiteboard to kind of illustrate the story that I'm going to kind of go through tonight. And the topic tonight is how fear shows up in the workplace and also how that ends up affecting high performance. So, as you know, I talk about different things like anxiety, depression, trauma, healing that, and getting yourself to a happy place. And I share this from my personal experience, strength, and hope, so that you guys can take away something that you can apply to your day to day life, and it'll have some sort of impact to be able to help you guys get to a happier place. So today is going to be focused a bit more on workplace kind of dynamics, and then going over um, how some past trauma ends up showing up in little ways, and how it has this whole trickle down effect, and it affects your team, it affects your sales, it affects your performance in ways that you're not even aware of. So this is what we're kind of going to go through today. And I'm going to show different aspects and different layers of fear. And so this should be pretty cool, pretty exciting, and just seeing different dynamics. And this kind of give you some insight of how I view things and how I apply change management techniques to be able to not only help mitigate those challenges in the workplace, but with my own personal inner work that I've done. Because of that, I'm able to see these things a bit more clearly. So to set the stage, the story, the context. So this was in my transport and logistics days. So there was a newer VP. He had been probably still in the position maybe about a year. So just long enough for the pink cloud honeymoon phase to kind of wane off of being in that role. And now the pressure's on. So there was a lot of pressure to increase our transport revenues. They were down, and things weren't going so well. So some of the ideas and plans that had been put in place didn't quite pan out. So we ended up having to have this pretty extreme project. And there had been lots of times where we had been meeting on this, we had been going through different things. Now, to give you some dynamics, okay, so this is the big cheese, the new guy, okay. He's the VP, he's responsible for increasing the transport revenue. This was myself, my boss, and then she had this pretty strong bond with the previous VP. And she kind of grew up in transport with him and worked very closely with him. And her and this guy did not really get along very well. There was a bit of a power struggle dynamic that was ending up happening. And oftentimes what would end up happening is he would try to implement something new. She would be like, this is not how the old cheese used to do it. And this is how we do things. So resistant to change. So again, fear comes up anytime somebody tries to implement new change. That's a normal human reaction. And so everything is a cry for love or an expression, or a cry for love or an expression of love. So but what ended up happening is, because he is under a lot of pressure, he's under a lot of anxiety to kind of look good in his new role. It ends up, he's in a fear state, she's in a fear state, and they end up having conflict because they are going through this whole power struggle dynamic, and then hurting people hurt people. So then they kind of start giving little digs here and there. And of course, respecting the chain of command, and they still do the things that they need to do, still act appropriate because they have certain roles to play within the business, right? But there's still this whole fear dynamic thing that's happening, and there's this power struggle. Um, so we go through these various things. We had this whole process that when some of the vendors, now just to give you some context, so in the transport situation, we were picking up from the people that created the products that we sold in the stores. And so, on one hand, we are their biggest customer. And on the other hand, we are also their customer because, uh, yeah, they are our customer. Sorry, they are our customer because we are picking up the freight for them. And so they could technically use a different transport service and they didn't have to use our in house service. So there's a little bit of a dynamic, and it's just giving you some context. So, on one hand, we had to get these vendors to sign off on the transport, the new transport increase. And some of them were extremely resistant to this, did not want to play ball at all. So this is some of the levels of negotiations that I've had to do. These aren't just people that were sales resistant or, maybe hesitant to whether or not to come on board. No, these people were actively, aggressively fighting against it and then having to be able to close in that situation. And by close, I mean gaining the trust, helping them understand why this decision is important and why they want to actually move forward with that. So this was important. So we had this whole escalation kind of scenario so that when certain vendors were resistant to the process and were not playing ball, we would involve the VP and we would have this conversation with the vendors. So some of the challenges. Now, this new VP didn't really know me that well, but I could sense that there was some judgment. There were some things that he didn't like about me, and I could tell that. So, of course, that makes me a little bit more anxious. But at the same time, I'm coming into this situation that I'm finally at the point where I'm able to start dealing with some of the higher level players more directly. I had been dealing indirectly, but I hadn't dealt as directly. So to me, I was excited about this opportunity to be able to prove myself and show that I could do more than what was already being given to me. Um, so now, in my eagerness to do this, I did not realize that sometimes I was stepping on toes because I wasn't aware of the fear that he was experiencing because I was used to the old cheese. And I was also used to some other VPs that I dealt with that were not so anxious. They were not so fearful. And so, because of that, um, we were in on this call. And so, understand that this is a pretty delicate negotiation. Whereas, on one hand, we kind of have to drop the hammer and get this vendor to do what it is we need them to do. And be a little bit more aggressive into why they actually need to do this. Yet at the same time, like in an hour or a couple hours or maybe the next day, we may have to actually work with the vendor to get a particular deal on a cost of goods that we're trying to order from them for the stores. So, and this is very much something that I had to deal with on a regular basis in transport and logistics, where, on one hand, I'd have to beat a carrier up for not delivering product on time, and the very next phone call I make to them, I'm begging them, I need them to pick up 10 rush loads for me. So um, there's a real delicate balance in being able to negotiate this and being able to talk to people in a way that you can give them negative feedback and still allow them to feel like you're on their side rather than me against you kind of thing, right? So I was very good at being able to, like some of my coworkers used to say, Tina, you've always been very good at telling people how to politely fuck off. And I think it's because I've had to do a lot of inner work and control with stuff like that, and really understanding um, to mitigate my own fears and really get those things under control. When I can get those things under control, I can look at the problem or the challenge that's in front of me much more objectively, and it's not such a personal thing. But if I'm in that state of fear, then it becomes this whole "I'll show you" kind of thing, right? And I think all humans are, to some degree, wired that way, right? So we had this vendor on the phone, and me being eager, probably ADHD too, I would jump in. I have a tendency to cut people off if I'm excited and I actually know the answer. I am that student that's I think it was Welcome Back Carter, which is a really fucking old show that I'm sure half of the people on TikTok don't even understand what I'm talking about. But there was a kid that was always like, ooh, 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 sticking his hand up. Hey, Tina, welcome. Um, so going through this, I'm like excited and I want to explain. And I had all the data. So because I was more, sorry, there's a lot of cat hair. The cats were laying on me before, so my nose is tickling, everything. So anyway, oh, of course. And that is Felix in the background singing his 2 cents worth. Are you done? Stop it. Hmm. Crazy cat lady. Yeah. Okay, so we're in this scenario. We're on the phone. We got the vendor there. We've introduced ourselves. We've kind of gone through all the pleasantries of the beginning part of the phone call. And now we're kind of getting into the details. Well, I'm the one that actually knows the numbers. I know the data. I have all the documents in front of me. I understand everything. So I jump in. I start explaining it. Mr. New Cheese here doesn't really know the numbers, doesn't really understand the stuff, jumps in and proceeds to embarrass me in front of the vendor by calling me out, telling me that I don't think those numbers are right. That's not correct. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? We are on the same side and you're calling me out in front of the vendor. But he was doing that as a way to kind of play like he's on the vendor's side, right? But didn't explain any of that stuff ahead of time to me. Um, and he also didn't really understand the numbers. So, of course, I'm upset now. I'm mad, but I stay quiet because I have to be professional, right, on the phone. So he proceeds to talk and do all this stuff, and he talks himself into a circle and then realizes that the stuff, because the vendor starts asking a bunch of questions and is like just grilling him, breaking him over the coals, which I'm enjoying this process a little bit, not gonna lie. But he goes through this and he realizes that he cut me off prematurely, that he didn't know the numbers enough. And he finally has to concede during the call that that he's like, you know what, I think maybe Tina could probably answer this better. And I was like, I just kind of looked at him eye to eye, like square in the eyes, and I was just like, I'm glad we have an understanding, right? So I didn't say that out loud, but my body language sure said that. Because there have been many, many times throughout my career that I have been treated this way, that I get walked over, get told that I don't understand the numbers and stuff like that, only to have these very same people that think that they know come back and kind of go, yeah, shit, sorry. What were you saying? So they never really apologized either. So I'm used to dealing with these kind of people, and they often get labeled as narcissists. But I don't see it in that particular way. What I see is I see their fear, I see their anxiety, and I don't take that personally. Like I may be mad in the moment, but I know not to react to this kind of stuff. Um, whether that's a personal setting or a professional setting. More times than not, we know not to do that in a professional setting because we could potentially lose our jobs. But oftentimes we let ourselves fire off when we're in a more personal setting, whether that's friends, family, loved one, anything like that. And the principles still apply is don't react, especially when you get to the first stage of fear, which is anger, right? It's the fight response. So, wanting to fight back and to argue is where you end up starting to lose that battle. And recognizing that as a stage of fear and understanding what do I need? What do I need? Because if I'm the one that's reacting, it's me that actually needs that support. What do I need to feel okay in this moment? So while I was mad about the whole thing, I also had positive self talk by telling myself he doesn't understand the numbers. He's trying to look good in front of the vendor. I'm not going to do what he just did to me. I'm not going to embarrass him because two wrongs don't make it right. So it's understanding that I stay professional, I stay aware of the situation, that it's a fear state. And I also give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt because he is the VP. So maybe he has more knowledge, more understanding. Maybe there's something else in the background that I am not aware of. So I give him those benefits of the doubt. Once it was my turn to actually go explain stuff, and I actually explained the stuff to the vendor was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense now. Now I understand it the way that so and so on their team, because what ends up happening when it got to the situation is whoever we were dealing with at like maybe a more mid-level management, they were afraid or they didn't have the authority to sign off on the process. And so they had to escalate internally, we had to escalate internally. So this is kind of where we were at with it. And so being able to gain that understanding, well, that VP from that company, from the vendor side, they, after that, they were like stuck to me, like they got attached to me. They came to me like for everything after that. I became like their new best friend because I finally was able to explain something to them in a way that actually made sense to them. And that reduced their fear about what the process was. And so being able to actually help them solve their problem, help them understand the situation much more clearly, gave them that confidence, that security, that reassurance, which is that expression of love, to be able to move forward with the process. And then also develop that relationship afterwards for other programs that we had beyond this particular project that we were working on. So, because of who I am and the kind of work that I've done for myself, and understanding these kind of things, if that had happened to a different person, that whole scenario could have caused somebody who's a high performer. So, what do I mean by a high performer? So, a high performer is, to me, somebody that not only is able to achieve the required targets for the role that they do, they are able to hit those targets consistently, without much effort, and without much thought. They just kind of are, they meet expectations on a regular basis and there's no issue there. So that is a meet expectations. A high performer is somebody that is able to go above and beyond, that they are able to not only meet those expectations, they are able to take on additional challenges, additional roles, and responsibilities within the business, maybe get assigned to different projects, help out with the team. They start their These are the ones that you look towards to who are your next leaders within the company, right? Now, if you have somebody who is operating at a high performance level and then you experience this kind of fear dynamic that happens and turns into a conflict, well, of course, Big Cheese and my boss, They were still at odds, and her seeing him treat me like that really, really made her mad. Brought out the mama bear in her. So she's like, not only did you, it's one thing you disrespect me, but it's another thing when you disrespect my team, right? So that there were many stroke breaks that we went through on that. So now that's lowered the trust there. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's not doing this inner work. He's not acknowledging his own fear. He's not taking responsibility for it. What that ends up doing is that creates a lack of respect. That fear starts to trickle down. So that's now embedded in her. She is responsible for a team of 10. That is going to play out in the dynamics of when he asks for certain things to be hit. Felix, honestly, come here. So that's going to trickle down. Even when she's being professional, it's going to come across in the energy. It's going to come across in my energy. So even though I may be a high performer, I might now just go down to a meet expectations level. I can't stay there because high performers are pretty much this is just how they're wired. They they might get mad for a few days or a little while and kind of just do the what they think is the bare minimum, which is everybody else's struggle to meet expectations. So my boss, she was very much like that as well. And so that lowers the performance. Now, maybe it only lasts a couple of days, but it's not just these one offs. How many times is that happening throughout your business where these little interactions and lack of awareness of it end up causing your team to lower their energy level, lower their feeling of connectedness with the team, feeling like the people that have authority actually have their back. And if they don't have their back, it causes that lower performance, even if it's not on a conscious level. Nobody's coming in and it's like, well, fuck you, I'm not doing that. No, it's just like a demotivated energy. And so when that happens, that starts coming across in their next phone call, their next interaction, their next team dynamic, even internally. So you end up having this whole lack of trust that happens. They start to feel like, do they even respect? Do they see what it is that I'm doing? Maybe if this has happened enough times, they start kind of going, you know what? Do I really need this? Right? Because you're always going to lose your top performers first. If you're going to lose people in your company, you're going to lose your top performers. And it'll be little shit like this that ends up doing it. That happens not just a one off, but happens multiple times in different little ways. And there was already stress and tension because this guy was so anxious. One of the other things that he would do is he would deliberately go out of his way to not actually walk past our section to say hello. He didn't want to, but there was another guy that he had to talk to, somebody that was actually more important. And it pained him, like he physically cringed when we said hello to him. And it was like an annoyance for him that he had to talk to the little people. And so that kind of energy comes across. Thank you so much for the gifts, Peter. I appreciate you so much. Um, so understanding these kind of things, these dynamics that play out, and I'm not blaming him or trying to make him out to the bad guy because I can see both sides. I can see he's under a lot of pressure. He's under a lot of anxiety because this old cheese got promoted and he has to fill this guy's shoes who's been around for 20 years. That's a tough, tough role to fill. But because of his fear and his lack of willingness to be vulnerable and gather support and request support from the team, he made us adversaries within the company because it was much more of an us against them. this is how leadership can end up impacting the team. And then everybody starts looking at that kind of stuff is not measured. How do you measure that, right? How do you connect the dots back to where that was? It's very, very difficult to see those kind of challenges. But this is where it starts. And this is why it's so important for leaders to actually do this inner work. Whether you're a business owner, a team lead, or you're looking to move up in your job or your career, if you are responsible for leading other people in any way, shape, or form, then these things are very, very important for you to understand. And it's not a matter of trying to be perfect because we're all human. We all have bad days. We all say shit that we didn't mean when we're under stress, right? And if you work in an environment that it's competitive, it's high performance, you have to be able to perform at these levels. And you also have to have the emotional um, fortitude to be able to manage these situations, because if not, you can do a lot of damage and not understand where the problem's coming from, why some of these KPIs are not measuring up, why your team is resistant, why your team is not opening up and communicating. And it's this little stuff like this that ends up happening. And I've done this many times where I've gone into different teams. I'll go deal with maybe, so like I said, whether it was a vendor or internally, any time that there was conflict, they would send me in because I was a less threatening, more neutral party. I seek to understand first. I don't come in with prejudgments and uh, expectations about how this is supposed to play out. I truly want to understand where is the problem, and I also truly believe that if we work together, that we can find solutions. And this is the whole dynamic. This works well for closing and sales, because imagine your team goes through something like this where they've experienced, maybe their manager gave them hell and kind of deflated them a bit. And I'm not saying that sometimes that's necessary, but there's a right way to do it. And what ends up happening, that starts showing up in your calls, right? Um, So when we're going through these certain things, we have to start looking at how is our behavior affecting the people that are immediate reports, and then how does their behavior end up affecting their reports. So these are important dynamics to start factoring in. And these are really difficult to try and measure, but they are worth understanding. So having that kind of communication, and being able to open up, and then also when you fuck up, when you make mistakes, being able to go back and actually express that and set that tone. I have to laugh. Felix, stop it. Oh my God. He's had his dinner, he's had water, he's had snacks. He just wants to be part of the star attention, I guess. So when you're going through these things, and depending on the emotional capability of your team, I've seen some people react really badly for a lot less than some of the stuff that I've heard, right? Like, and I've experienced. And but I've also developed a very thick skin, not only from my traumatic childhood, but years of transport and logistics experience. It's like there's no crying in freight. So I developed a pretty thick skin. I understand how to do stuff, right? Now, that also led to years of compartmentalizing emotions. And then when I finally did like crack the lid open up on that, that just kind of blew up on me. Sorry, coach. You know who you are. But those kind of things, when I actually, like, all of those emotions kind of blew up and having to process through them. Because one of the things, I had a boss at a previous company that he was like, I had gotten upset, and I had been dealing with this warehouse manager that was just, again, I didn't recognize it fully as fear, right? But he was super controlling, and it didn't matter what you asked him, his first answer was no. Didn't matter. Even if it was completely reasonable, you had all the documentation, and he had just said yes to somebody previously, and then you come and ask for the same thing. He's like, nope, because he wanted to make you work for it. It made him feel like he was in control, in power. And so again, these are little things. If people don't do any inner work, they start to play out these dynamics. They play out this tit for tat kind of thing, and it causes unnecessary friction within the business that you are unaware of. And this is why it's so important for not only you as leaders to set that pace and do that inner work and understand and gain that emotional intelligence, but to also trickle that down throughout the culture in your company, because these little things start playing out even with the customers, right? Because I've seen too many times where there will be people, if they are speaking to somebody higher up, they know the appropriate way to respond and they do all the right things. And then they turn around and they treat the people below them completely like garbage. And that ends up impacting the people that they deal with, whether that's drivers, vendors, um, suppliers, customers, any of those kind of things that end up having an impact. And that attitude gets transferred. And then they have that power struggle dynamic. And even within families, dysfunctional families, they talk about dad beats mom, mom beats the kids beat the cat kind of thing, or the dog, right? And it just kind of trickles down. And this is where we have to look at where are the cycles of trauma happening within the organization, and what can we do to actually stop those and mitigate those and to change the direction by understanding where these things came from. And this can be very difficult to do, especially if it's been going on for a long period of time. Why? Because now people don't want to actually open up about it. This high performer that was doing good, but then just got treated like shit and is now at a mid-level and just meeting expectations. Well, now your numbers are definitely going to go down because your high performers aren't excited about performing. And you can yell at them. You can say, we got to get our numbers up. We got to do these things. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Because when I was working hard, when I was doing all these things, you didn't give a shit and called me down for it. So these little things, now they're not going to be able to speak up about that. Why? Because they need to keep their job. It gets really hard. The power dynamic there is not conducive to being able to open up. This is why it's so important for a leader to actually set that tone, show that example, to be that guiding light for the rest of the team. So if the leaders, the people at the top, do not do that inner work, then it is going to trickle down in some way, shape, or form. And then that impacts how the business performs. This costs you a lot of money that you can't track with a key KPI. Now, you might be fortunate to have somebody like me on the team, where one of the things that I did is, even when people felt beat down, I made sure that even within our own little pocket, our own little team, and I did this up and down the chain too. So the people that were on the same level as me, people that were reporting into me, and also people that I reported into, that I made sure on a daily basis that they felt like I had their back, that I wouldn't let them down, that I would cover them, that I would be there for them, that, yes, these things are challenging that we're going through, but we can do this together. And we can laugh at the nonsense that happens in any day-to-day job, right? I don't care if you have the best job in the world, there will be a component of it that you think is just total bullshit. And that's normal, that's okay. Um, and to expect anything otherwise is not realistic, right? So you can have those challenges and still find them as part of it. It's almost like a fun thing, right? So um, I know I used to banter a lot back and forth with my boss of going through different things. Like when we had a new project on the go, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to have all this and this and that and the other thing. And we got all these challenges and we're going to have to do this and we're going to get this person to do that. And we kind of like just brainstormed together and it was like really fun. And we kind of fed off of each other. So there was a good energy exchange there. And it was one that's built out of love and support because it's like, hey, I got you, you've got me, and we're on the same team. We're working together, and even with other people, we're still extending that energy. Why? Because our group was really tight together. We were very supportive. We expressed a lot of love and appreciation and gratitude for each other on the team. And then when we dealt with other teams that um, maybe their managers weren't so good. They kind of ruled with a bit of an iron fist, and you could feel the closed offness, the unwillingness to cooperate, unwillingness to communicate, to open up, to actually talk about the real issues. Um, and so we always made sure we had on our team to, even if there were problems, that we actually talked about them forthright, honestly, of, hey, this is what's going on, and you didn't get punished for talking authentically. So those were really important things, and because of that, we were able to work together, and we all pitched in together to actually solve the problems. Now, does that mean we were perfect? No, we still had struggles, we still had our days. Um, there were a bunch of women, so there were certain times that we'd have a lot of chocolate around in the office, you know, just to kind of get us through. But um, we we knew how to support one another. We knew how to work together. That being said, there's different challenges that end up coming up. Um, so in a fear-based work environment, so oftentimes what ends up happening, yeah, you've been there too, hey Gap? Yeah. So in a fear-based work environment, what ends up happening is because everybody's so closed off, they're not willing to go deep, everything is surface level. All they're trying to do is to stay out of trouble, get them off my back, get them off my ass. Whatever's the quickest solution, let's just do that. Just say whatever they need to say. So you can tell that that's going to be a problem if your sales team is in that fear based mentality where say whatever you need to say, because if not, if we don't close this deal, if we don't get this sale, then we're going to get beat up about our KPIs being off, our numbers are off, and then, you know what, I'm going to get written up, or I'm going to get called out, or I'm going to get fired, whatever it is, right? So you could have this on your sales team. This could be in your customer performance. People might end up hiding, lying, covering up, deflecting, blaming somebody else so that you're not paying attention to them. It's like, oh, well, you think that's bad. You should see what this other team's done. And I've seen people do this where they kind of get those aggressive bulldogs that are within the company. They have their purpose, those guard dog ones that, are the attack dogs. Um, they'll get them to go attack a different team. And then you end up having competition that happens within the company. And what you actually need within the company is collaboration, not competition. And you can have a lot of problems that come up because of that. So when you have this whole fear-based mentality that's happening within the work environment, what ends up happening is you have a lot of band-aid solutions that end up happening. So for example, somebody like, okay, let's take dress codes, right? Okay, somebody came in, it's summertime, they're wearing a little bit too short of a skirt, or they wore flip flops into the office or something like that. And so now there's this whole HR policy of what the appropriate dress wear is and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because instead of having that one on one conversation in a constructive way, it now becomes these whole rules, and now everybody makes fun of it because they feel very restricted and constrained again. This can also happen to, like, say, a company has a policy that, you can't have any other job besides the one at that company. That is a very fear based mentality. Here's why. Because if you have people within your organization that are doing their jobs, they're able to meet those criteria to do that job, and they are still able to create a side hustle. So, me, I was a high performer at my corporate job, and I always had a side hustle. That should be a very clear indicator that that is a person that you should target for leadership. That is a person that requires more challenge, and they don't see that challenge, that ability to make more money within the company. If you create that instead of a rule to say, you can't do this, you're not allowed, then that is a huge friggin' problem. That is a fear based mentality that trickles down into your environment. Imagine it's like, oh, don't come work here. You're not going to be allowed to do anything. Like, this whole fear-based thing will happen even if they're smiling. It's like, yeah, no, it's great to work here. I'm not allowed to do anything other than what they say. No, no, that's going to come across. It's going to come across anybody they talk to, customers, vendors, potential clients, sales, any of those kind of things. It's going to come across. There's fear because you took something very surface level rather than taking the time to truly understand and leverage that as potential. Okay, who in our company does have a side hustle? Great. Those are the fucking people we want to develop for our next leadership, who we want to bring up in the company. Because if they have the capacity, they have the bandwidth to do well in their corporate job, and they are still they're seeking to do more outside of the company, ah, instead of punishing and creating rules, bring that forth. We want to hear your ideas. What are you actually working on? Have a sense of curiosity. Look to understand. Seek to understand. What are they doing? What are they working on? What are they passionate about? How can you actually leverage that within your company and allow your company to expand and grow instead of being punitive? This is the difference between having a fear-based, constrictive, punishing environment where you have to use dominance and control. You will never be able to step away from the business. You will always be working in the business because everybody is too afraid to actually speak the truth. Everybody is too afraid to expand and open up and contribute to the growth of the company. Why? Because they don't feel they make a difference. They don't feel like their contributions are valued. Have When people feel loved, they naturally give. I mean, think of whoever has treated you very well, and maybe you didn't quite deserve that treatment, and maybe you were given a chance when you maybe didn't have the skills, or but somebody was willing to take you under their wing, and they were willing to put the time and effort to help develop you, help you grow, and help you see the future potential that you have within the company. And they encouraged you, and they said, yeah, I can really see you growing into this. Like, hey, you're on the right track. Keep doing this. That kind of behavior is going to get such dedication, such loyalty that you could step away for a friggin' year, maybe 5 years. I don't know. But you can definitely step away from that business, and people are going to be happy to continue to contribute to the growth of that company. And instead of looking for ways, how do we cut people back? How do we, because a lot of the bean counters, they look at your people as your expense, as your problem. No, these people are actually your solution. And how do you develop them? How do you show them what it is that's possible with potential? And if you help them do that inner growth work, why? Because you've done it. When you do that, then they will also follow your lead because you are now in a much better place. You are not reacting out of fear, or when you are, you recognize when you're in a state of fear and you know how to manage your own emotions so that you don't actually contribute to the damage. And even if you can't give, you at least don't harm, right? Obviously not perfect, because even in with the best of intentions and best of awarenesses, people will still have reactions because of whatever they have been through, the whatever filter that they're looking through. But when we are strong within ourselves, then we are able to look at this in a much better light. We're able to see this in a way that it's not a problem, because I can promise you, you know how to deal with this. If a potential paying customer or a potential deal was on the line and that person's acting like an ass, you know how to manage your emotions long enough to close that deal, right? Right. That's what I thought. So don't tell me you can't do it. It's because you think that person's below you. You think that there's a hierarchy. You think that there's nothing that that person can teach you because they are technically below you. You're full of shit. You're afraid that you might actually have to change your mind. You might actually have to say, shit, I was wrong. And that could be very threatening for some people, depending on what childhood you grew up in. So, doing this stuff, it's really hard. I'm not saying it's easy work. This is hard work. It is. It's important work, though, and it has a lasting impact on how you deal with people. And they will never remember the things that you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So even if you screw up, even if you make mistakes, even if you yell at them and you lose your shit, if they know the majority of the time that you had their best interest at heart, that you gave them the time, you gave them the effort, you gave them the energy, you extended your love to help them get better, then they will respond in kind. Now I know this can get really, really tough, really, really challenging. And it seems like it's a never ending fucking black hole to try and fill these people up sometimes. I get it. Because I know we did this, there was one year we were talking about giving Christmas gifts to the team, and we, like the leadership team was talking about this, and we were doing this out of our own pocket and stuff like that. And what ends up happening is like there was some resentment that was building up because it's like we'd give this stuff and then they felt like it wasn't enough and they started to expect it and stuff like that. So it wasn't valued, but at the same time, we have to manage our own expectations. Am I doing this so that they behave properly? No, 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 because that is an Felix. No, fucking cat. All right, it's my cue to take a little drink here. This is why I'm a crazy cat lady. That's right, Miko, kick his ass. Anyway, it's fun. It's Friday night, right? So it's fun topics. So, Christmas gifts. So, people were kind of expecting it, and it's like, then you get this whole premeditated resentments by, it's like, oh, are you giving this because, why are you giving those gifts, first of all? Are you giving it as an expression of your appreciation? And even if they don't appreciate it, are you okay with that? Or if you give this stuff and maybe they thought that they should get better or something like that, I know that can be really tough, but then you have to question, what is the reason why I'm doing that? Why am I giving, right? Because empaths, we're guilty of this all the time. We give way too much and then we end up being resentful because we don't get it back. That is premeditated resentment. So unspoken expectations lead to premeditated resentment. So you end up feeling upset and hurt by these things rather than stopping and questioning. It's like, oh, you know what? I did kind of have an expectation that if I did X, they were going to do Y, and that didn't happen. So that's where we have to question ourselves. Did we actually speak that? Did we actually communicate that to them? If we did, then that's a whole different kettle of fish that you kind of got to talk about and look at boundaries and respect and all those kind of things, right? But if you didn't, more times than not, I can promise you, when you feel resentful about something, it's because you didn't actually communicate something clearly and directly. And why? Because we're often afraid to do that. Because what if I communicate clearly, I communicate directly, and they still don't do the thing? That changes the dynamics a bit. Then you actually have to do this. Whereas if you don't actually communicate, then you can kind of go, oh, I can let that go. It's not that big a deal. Oh, they're in a good mood today. I must have just been in a bad mood the other day. I'll just let it slide. Well, you let it slide, you let it slide, you let it slide, you let it slide, and then you had enough one day and you send that friggin' angry email that just trashes the hell out of everybody, and now nobody likes you. Ask me how. I know I've done that more than enough times within my career. I got better over the years to even when I was being direct about things. And when I was being firm, I would also be fair. So before, I wasn't so much. And I got to the point where I was always proofreading other people's emails so that they could say what they wanted to say, get the communication across clearly. But I would come along and I'd be like, no, no, that's going to cause a fight. No, that's going to cause a fight. No, no, take this out too. Reword it to this instead, and then be like, oh, okay, it actually, they came back, they responded positively. Imagine that. So understanding how to communicate in a way that doesn't add fuel to the fire is huge. And we always have to look at our reactions to fear, our reactions to how do we react when we're afraid? Do we get aggressive? I know there's been times that I've done that where I didn't feel like it was justified, and I had given and given and given and given and given to this particular employee. I'd supported their, and then they still bit back, and I'm like, motherfucker. And I had it. And I was aggressive. Like, I'm like, you thought it was a bitch before? That was my nice side. That was my nice side. I was being nice to you. Now I'm just gonna ease off of the niceness a little bit, and I'm going to be direct and I'm going to be firm. And I still felt like a shitbag because that's not how I operate. And so it kind of pulled me out of character. Why? Because I was in a state of anger. I was in a state of fear. I felt justified. If you feel justified with however you're behaving, it's like, well, they had it coming, right? No, that is a red flag that you need to look at your behavior. You're doing a lot more damage than you realize. Okay? So, like I said, the stuff that I share isn't about who's right, who's wrong. It's not like the old cheese was the better cheese. This old cheese had some character flaws as well. It's not like she couldn't get along with this guy, but she didn't feel like he tried to understand her. He tried to dominate her. He tried to gain control to show he's the new boss, right? So he's only doing that because he's afraid. And she actually knows more about the business. But instead of admitting that and going to her and seeking her guidance, seeking her support, seeking her wisdom, her knowledge, he tried to dominate. And she was like, fuck that. I've been here for years. I grew up here, like from high school. And, she's done a lot for the company. She's brought in a lot of revenue, income. She's put blood, sweat, and tears. And now this new guy's going to come in and tell her what's what, which also leads back to a problem with the big cheese not properly introducing this guy, not properly edifying this guy, not properly supporting. Threw him in, said, "You're the new guy? Show us what you got." Mm, wrong strategy. Because now there's all these little conflicts, there's all these little cliques and divides, and some really, really strong people that have been with the company 20 plus years, had been there since they were young, put blood, sweat, and tears into that company, started to get fed up with this guy's behavior, this guy's fear, this guy's dominance. And he was treating the good people like they were the problem, when all of these people just wanted to be part of the solution. This is what can cause huge problems within your company. And sure, you can bring in new people that maybe cost less money and everything looks good on the P&L. It looks good that, hey, we've saved money because instead of paying, this person 80 grand, we now have somebody that we pay 65. Do that enough times, that starts looking good on the P&L. But now we've lost all the wisdom, all the knowledge that was with the company. Then instead of developing these people that were actually eager, that actually believed in the company, that are actually loyal, lost them. I was one of those casualties because of how things were handled. And it's not because I wasn't one of those people. I actually loved the people that I worked with. But when I saw this kind of behavior at the senior levels, I got really discouraged. I was like, okay, there's nobody for me to learn from here. And it's not that I can't learn. It's not that I'm not willing. Will I speak up? Will I call you and hold you accountable to shit? Absolutely. Because I have a high level of emotional intelligence. And if you treat me right, I will friggin' kill myself trying to work for you. You treat me like shit, and I'll be like, okay, I will do what is required. You don't get that better version of me. I will, because that's the worst I can do is just what's required. But I can do so much more. And I can grow into so much more. And I can promise you that there are people within your company that you can develop and grow into so much more. And there are people that you've probably lost within your company because of nonsense like this, because of the lack of inner work that wasn't done. And so fear can cost you a lot, and there's no way to measure it until after the damage is done. So, and then you might end up having to do certain things like I've seen in companies that they bring in change management experts to help change the culture, and that costs them a ton of money, a ton of money. And that doesn't even encounter all the training workshops, the off-site things, the senior levels, because now we have to change everybody's management style. And that's not an easy change after years of having this cutthroat, competitive kind of environment where number one, doesn't matter who you trample on, we've got the biggest hammer, just smash them down, we'll get what we want. That worked in the good old days. That will not work in this kind of environment, this kind of work environment. Now, maybe if the economy tanks, maybe that's part of the whole plan. if the economy tanks so bad that everybody has no friggin' job, and well, now beggars can't be choosers, so they're going to suck it up, cupcake. However, I can still promise you, even if you have people that have come in and they're like, there's nothing worse, because I've had that through my career as well, where I was forced into a position where I was much higher, I was capable of so much more. I had to take a lower level position that was like 20 grand a year less than what I was used to making, just because I needed to make something. My husband had lost his job and I needed to find some sort of work. And because we both couldn't be out of work. And I quit school and I went back to work. And that's how I was able to do the job that I was doing. But in doing that, I was able to do so much more, and there was a lot of tension and resentment and stuff like that because the job that I was hired to do was actually way too easy. I could do it blindfolded, and I often took on additional projects, additional um, responsibilities within the company, stuff that wasn't even asked of me, wasn't even part, even close to the scope of my job. And it's just something that I naturally do anyway. And being in that, and my poor manager, she's stuck because why? There's these surface level structures, these rules of that you are only allowed to give a certain increase. Even if you got a promotion, there was rules and structures in place that you couldn't get more than X percent of an increase, and there were all these different bands, and it was all pretty on paper of how this structure is, and that looks really good, but it became so restrictive, fearful, right? Because all of these rules are put in place to solve a problem, and if those problems are only solved at surface level quick fixes, band-aid solutions, then eventually you are going to get to the point where you're going to have to tear everything down and rebuild. And that's when you need a change management person. So, hey, I am ProSci certified change management. So, and that I got long after I have, which it's great to have the certification, not knocking it for sure. But the real world experience, day to day, boots on the ground, that is so much more valuable. I mean, let's face it, would you rather hire somebody who is brand new, they only have their degree and their certification in something, or do you want the person that's got the years of experience behind it? That maybe doesn't have all the technical terms and doesn't have the fancy pie charts and this and that and the other thing, but they actually know how to get the job done. Those are the ones. And those can be really hard to find, especially if you have all kinds of AI structures and restrictions, filtering out resumes to save you time that are losing you good people. But that's a talk for a whole other time. But so this is an example of how fear in the workplace can cost you. It can cause your high performers to become average performers, even if that's only done for a couple of days. Because, I mean, I can't stay mad at anything, and I'll do it for a couple of days, maybe bitch, moan, sulk. But if that kind of happens, and it happens with enough frequencies, maybe it's a couple of weeks, maybe it's a month worth out of the year where you didn't get the best performance out of me because of this kind of nonsense. Now, I also have to take responsibility for my stuff as well. I'm not saying it's all their fault, but if you have the proper communication, this stuff can get mitigated. This can be transformed and transmuted a lot faster through proper communication, knowledge of inner work, knowledge of traumas, knowledge of people's reactions, and understanding those kind of things. And although it's slow going at first and it's kind of painful at first, doing this will save you so much more in the long run. And it will not only that, it will develop not only the people that you have into better leaders, it will help them develop other leaders as well. And that will help your company grow exponentially because you want all of your best leaders to be coming from within the organization. Not to say outside experts don't have valuable insight. Maybe you kind of hit a new area that you need to expand, but wherever possible, you want to bring the people in that were already in up. Just like it's easier to sell to your existing customers rather than obtain a new customer, it costs more. You want to be able to promote within, which means you have to have the right culture, the right company that they see potential ongoing growth and monetary reward that matches that as a way for them to continue to grow. And some companies have got some really great structures that they do that long-term planning of where they want to be able to get to, where they want to be able to grow to, and to have that knowledge and insight, and they can see that long term. And even with those nice vision plans and mapped out and everything, that can get derailed if you have something like this. Because the company I was at, I thought I was going to actually retire at. But there were other plans. And now I'm out here, out here in the wild, being all crazy. So, so guys, with that, I hope you found this helpful. I will be uploading this to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. You can catch the replay there. You can also follow me on Facebook. And yeah, if you like more of this kind of stuff, if you like more of the business side of things, um, I like doing the business side. So like I like doing the emotional work and the touchy-feely kind of stuff, but I also like the analytical, practical application of why it's important to do this inner work and how you can leverage that to build your company, to um, have better collaboration, better customers, better service that you provide, better profit margins, all of those kind of things. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you so much. It's so good to see you in here, and thank you so much for the gifts. I really, really appreciate that. So thanks. So guys, I hope this was great, and we will see you again tomorrow night. If there's any topics that you want me to cover, you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to do a training on that, okay? Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Bye.